jingle bells, jingle all the way.
Hey, it's Jordan Nash from Lights on Arthur, and we have a few fun new things this year. Some of you have been asking for a behind-the-scenes video, so here it is. So this is our track system. There's two trees, of course. Happy Tree's over here, and Grumpy Tree is right here. And the premise of it is that Happy Tree wants to give Grumpy Tree his decorations, so Grumpy Tree gets cut down instead of Happy Tree. So Happy Tree approaches Grumpy Tree. Grumpy Tree doesn't want his decorations, but eventually Happy Tree gives it to Grumpy Tree, and Grumpy Tree gets cut down. So the track here is 20 feet long. If you look inside of here, we have inch and a quarter PVC that's been halved, and that creates the track. So half of it's on this side, half of it's on this side. And if you look at the dolly here, there's just roller skating wheels on the dolly here, and they sit inside that PVC really nicely. But I was thinking about the wind. We do get a little bit of wind here, and I wanted to make these trees so they didn't flop over. So if you push the trees around, notice that the dolly stays in place pretty well, and that's because of these pieces of wood on top. So, you know, as I lean this, the wheels will catch on these pieces of wood on top, so the wind doesn't blow it over. There's a string here. This is paracord. And that string goes through a pulley at the end, which I'll show you in a second, and then over here through this is just a clothesline pulley from Lowe's, and that's how it goes back and forth. And then over here I have a turnbuckle, and that's how I can tighten this paracord, get it to the right tension. Too tight and your motor doesn't want to spin because it's too much tension. Too loose, and it won't get enough grip on the motor. So. This one is just zip tied to this frame, so it stays on the frame, but the other one, because it gets cut down, it actually tips over. So I have a few bricks in the back here, and that's just for a little bit of counterweight. I guess I don't really need these, but it helps a little bit. And just to show you how the tipping mechanism works, I'm gonna unhook this, this turnbuckle here and tip it over. So as I drive this, look at this wheel right here. As I drive it, that wheel drives up and the entire thing tips over, and then it can move over to the side. And then there's also a stop right here. So as it tips over, it hits that stop right there, so it doesn't tip too far. So the first bit of the next song, it drives back. This wheel catches right here, and as it keeps driving, it uprights itself. And boom, it's reset. So the next thing to point out is these limit switches. I have 4 of these limit switches on each end of both tracks. And as it comes, it'll hit that limit switch, and you can hear the click there. It'll stop. Now Happy Tree only comes to this position, so the limit switch doesn't go through the full length of the track. You know, it'll stop right there. Now this is something that's kind of tricky. With the board, you have your voltage going to your motor, and the voltage actually goes in series through both of these switches, which are normally closed switches. So when they trigger, it'll open the circuit and cut off the motor. The problem is that if it's going this way, and the switch triggers, and then the motor reverses, how does it go the other way? Because the switch is triggered. So if you look real closely here, there's a few diodes there. So if this is triggered, the motor can no longer go this way, but if the voltage is reversed through this, it'll bypass this switch through the diode, and the motor can go the other way. So one diode here is for this switch, and then one diode bypasses this wire, and then that wire goes to the switch on the other side. So when Happy Tree gets reset, he moves all the way down here to this end, and there's a cutoff switch right here, and that'll trigger, and then there's also a hard stop right here. Here's my advice: don't get cheap wood because it will split. This is the cheapest wood that I can find, but there's also over 270 feet of wood just to build this dolly track.
Or make pilot hose.
All right, next let's look in our control box here. The trusty E-stop is always a good idea on the top. This is just a cheap e-stop that I found on Amazon. You don't necessarily need an e-stop with this. It's just I'm moving a lot of weight here, and if something were to happen, it's a lot easier to hit a button to shut the whole thing down than it is to log onto my Pi and stop the whole system from running. So let's look inside. So the e-stop only intersects the power going into the Pixel to Things board, not the rest of the control box. So it'll only shut off the motors, which is exactly what we want it to do. And thanks to David Peace for inventing these boards. They've been fantastic to work with. Super simple to set up. There's virtually no configuration, and it's very plug and play. So what I have here is I have my 12-volt power supply going into an F4, and then an F4 comes out port 1, just pixel data, directly into the Pixel to Things board. So we have the data coming in here, and we have 9 outputs here, and I'm using all 9 of them. And I'll explain why I need 9, because there's only 2 motors here, and there's a third one by the chainsaw there, which I'll explain in just a second. The premise of why I need 9 switches, or 9 outputs, is because I use some outputs to reverse the direction of the motor. So over here I have a little circuit board that has 2 relays on it. They're double pull, double throw relays. And when the relay is triggered, it reverses the polarity of the motor. Now those are not momentary relays, which means that I need a trigger to reverse it, and then a trigger to unreverse it, if that makes sense. So I have, my first output is the speed, and then the second output is basically turning the motor so it moves the tree left, and the third output is turning the motor so it goes right. So the second and third outputs, I just need a quick little trigger on it, so I just use the on effect and trigger it for just a half a second, so it'll trigger that relay, and then it'll move the tree in one direction or the other direction. So when it resets, you know, it'll run that third channel just a hair of a second. It'll reverse the motor, and then it'll come back and reset. So yeah, we have happy tree speed, happy tree left, happy tree right, grumpy tree speed, grumpy tree left, grumpy tree right, and the this board shares a common positive. So I have 1 relay, I have a speed and a positive. That's my common positive right there, and then left and then right, and then grumpy tree, speed, common positive, left and right. So on this relay board, I have my happy tree and my grumpy tree. And I have my voltage in, my left and my right through that one, voltage in, left and right through that one. I have my 2 outputs going to the 2 motors here, happy tree, grumpy tree, and then these 2 wires go out to the switches. So I have the far switch and the near switch both in series on that one, and then a far switch and a near switch in series on that one. So the voltage actually passes through the relay, out through this cord, through both switches, then back through this cord, and then to the motor, and likewise with the other side. Okay, out of the relay board, then it just goes directly to these motors. These motors I found on SparkFun, and they're a fairly low gear ratio, and then they come out here to these pulleys, and in the middle there's just a rubber wheel, and then you just drill some holes in the box here and run the paracord through around the pulley and back out again. You could not possibly have a tree get sawed down without a chainsaw. Thanks to James at Boscoyo for custom making this chainsaw for me. It's been wonderful, and it's absolutely the perfect size. And using, again, the Pixel to Things board, I put a motor on the chainsaw, and the motor moves the chainsaw up and down. So I have a fulcrum back here. To give this chainsaw a little bit of counterweight, I put a small socket set, you know, just some weight on here. And then inside here, I have a motor, again from SparkFun. And then as the motor spins, it turns this little cam on the outside here. And then as that spins, the entire chainsaw runs up and down and cuts down the tree. Now, when I was thinking about this, I said, well, I don't want this chainsaw to be caught in the up position during the times when it's not running. So I wanted a way so when it runs, it will always stop in the down position. So the solution to that was putting a little switch in here. And there's another little switch right there. And every time that this rotates, there's a pin in here that hits this switch and turns it off. So right now it's in the down position, so the switch is triggered. And then as it spins, you know, it'll trigger the switch once every rotation. So then how do you make the chainsaw go up and down multiple times and only stop in the down position when you want it to? Well, you use another relay and make a bypass for the switch. So there's my other 3 channels. I have one channel for the speed of the chainsaw, and then one channel that bypasses the switch so it can continuously run around and around. And then when the relay is triggered, then it unbypasses the switch, and then the next rotation, when it hits the bottom and the switch is triggered, it will cut voltage to the motor and shut off the motor. The next thing that's really cool about this is a spark machine. Because chainsaws make sparks, and because sparks are awesome, right? This is a spark machine that's out of China. I don't know exactly what the model is, and it takes a DMX input. So I come out of my F4 through a DMX and just run a channel to it, a single channel, and I run it at about 20-30%. And then that will shoot sparks as the chainsaw starts going. And then this motor starts going a second later and essentially cuts down the tree as the dolly starts moving to the side. Happy Tree does his little celebration song. What? This has just been such a fun project to work on. Hope you guys like it.
Do you like my decorations?